Whatever that is. No? What? Is it still muted?
Right guys, how you doing? I'm Finux, Arron, whatever you want to call me. So, I'm going to talk to you today about something that it's just for shits and giggles and a little bit of fun. But it's to do with a IDS signature in Snort, which was quite interesting. I'm involved in IDS testing. I don't work for a vendor. I do sort of like assessments and stuff like that of boxes. And this rule got sent to me. So probably maybe 15 minutes, maybe 10, but let's get started. So as I said before, this is just for shits and giggles, but it does highlight a serious point about signatures and where they really, really fail. So I'm going to talk to you about something that's a little bit old, RF Paralyzer. Now, this is back from 2000, and I know you're all sitting there thinking, Finix, I'm going to need to find the keys to the DeLorean and hit 88 miles an hour. But this rule is still there. It's very, very, shows a lot of issues that we have. It's picked on Snort, and I do pick on Snort quite a bit, but I think because they're open, it enables us to be a little bit more. We can't really get the same review when we do other vendors. So, you know, Snort is cool. I don't pick on them. I think that vendors should do a better job than the guys at Snort, because a lot of these guys do it in their spare time. So, I'm going to talk to you about RF Paralyzer. RF Paralyzer was developed by a guy called Rainforest Poppy. Some of you will probably be familiar with his work. It's a pretty cool dude. What he did is he found an exploit out in the wild targeting 95 and 98 systems. And basically what happened is you used to point it at a box and it would knock the box over. Discovered it in the wild, I think it was called Whisper. So he reverse engineered this product, he reverse engineered it, and it turns out to be some net BIOS sort of freaky thing going on. And basically if there was a null fragment in the source host field, that would break the machines, and 95, 98 would either crash or reboot. Remote as well, I may add. So it seems to be a really good rule sort of for IDSs to get involved. This is their job. This is what they're supposed to be able to detect. And when he did it, he had a joke in his code about how he hard-coded a message. So what would happen was a NetBIOS message session would pop up from Beavis that would say, yep, yep. If you saw that, you'd be fine. If you didn't see that, because your computer was rebooted. And he had a joke in his code saying, oh, you know, I've hard-coded it in, they'll hate me for this, blah, 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 blah. So, a Snort developer thought what he would do is write a rule that goes a little bit like this. So on the external network, coming in, onto the home network on port 139, if you see content from Beavis with yep, yep, alert. So, okay. This is interesting, but it seems to cut a few corners, because what we're really looking for is this, you know, this null fragment in the server host. But to visualize what they're actually saying is this: if you see Beavis with yep yep, fire an alarm. Well, all IDS evasions start with the first question of what if, and they all do, every single one of them. So what if the message came from Bothead rather than Beavis? And you guess what? Bypasses detection straight away. Okay, well, what if the message still came from Beavis, instead said no, no? You've guessed it again, bypass detection. Did I mention that this is from 2000? Okay, so we are like 12 years down the line. This rule's still there, still in this state. Okay. But the thing that we have to remember is that this was reverse engineered from code caught in the wild from an exploit called Whisper. Rainforest Poppy took it. We know that the original payload, the original exploit, doesn't contain Beavis and yep yep, doesn't contain Bothead and yep yep, doesn't contain any of these. How many of you are pen testers? Raise a hand. I've heard that the Swedish audience is shy, but I'd like you to prove me wrong. So we've only got, what, 2, 3 pen testers in the audience? That can't be right. Come on. How many of you basically get this? You produce a POC, give it to the client patches the POC and doesn't fix the vulnerability. And you go back again and say, great, hang on, give me 2 minutes. Oh look, here's the vulnerability. This is exactly what's happened here. Okay? So this rule defends against rainforest poppy, but does not defend against Whisper. Okay? This will do no good to it. So if you contact me later on, I've got the code where I've basically altered the message to come from Beavers, and I've got the PCAP files and the screenshots and bypass detection. But the problem is, the issue per se is not the issue is almost sloppy rules, because what we're doing is we're getting the contact. We're getting the content saying this is critical. Now, as I said before, it's pretty easy for us to detect a non-fragment in the server host field of a NetBible session. It's, we're doing packet analysis as it happens, and we should be able to do this. But when you start looking at some of the rules that you see in IDS systems, you start to think that maybe they've been smoking crack. This is one of my favorite IDS rules. So this comes from SID 1394. For Finux Gold Stars, can you guess what it's trying to detect? No, well, it's trying to detect a buffer overflow. But yeah, the worrying thing is this is on revision 12. Okay, so this means that someone has written it 12 times. I don't know if they started off with 4 A's and went, shit, we're getting a lot of false positives. And they thought, no, we'll get 8. No, that's still getting us false positives. We'll do this. This is interesting, because what would you think the next natural progression would be if you've got all the A's? You would think the next natural progression would be all the B's. That would teach you for thinking. The interesting thing here is, again, revision 12. C's. Now what's actually really interesting, because I'm picking on them slightly, is they actually started with this rule first, and thought that this rule was a good idea. Great. Now, this rule, how many of you got a snort box or know someone who runs a snort box? Okay, for shits and giggles, if you put that in a fake URL parameter, you will really piss them off. It's like the easiest false positive that you can possibly get. So this works on any IP traffic, on any port going from external to internal. So you stick this in the URL, you stick this in your email signature, this will fire off a false positive. This will fire off a false positive. If you want to detect claim AV running on an email server, stick that in your email signature, email it to someone, and if they don't get the email message, they're running claim AV. Nice, false positive to enumerate security devices. Absolutely awesome. But the shit gets even worse. So these are the fun ones, but when you look, these are just some of them. Spare 5 minutes looking about. I'm not sure how well you can see them, but these strings on any port will fire off a false positive. Fake URLs, email signatures, whatever you like. Now if you're a vindictive person, which I'm totally not, okay, but maybe what you could do for shits and giggles would be to change your user agent in Firefox so that it has any of these. Now, what I can tell you is, hypothetically of course, that if you change your user agent to have all of the A's, and you go and visit somewhere like Facebook, each URI request will generate a false positive. So if you go to one of those busy websites, you'll probably generate 60 to 70 false positives in any one go. How long do you think it will be before they rub that rule out? Not good for you at all. As I say, these are just some of them. And the problem is with this really is it's not detecting anything. What it's doing is saying, well, this is obviously a bad guy. Well, really, that doesn't actually say anything, does it? It's just a load of A's. Another pro tip for you, because this is quite an old rule. We're into the very old rule. We've got all the A's, we've got all the C's, we don't have any of the B's. If you're writing buffer overflows, may I suggest that you use Z's? Because you're probably about 12 years from detection. Now watch someone go and write a rule with all the Z's now. But yeah, strings don't have a mixture of the A's and the B's and all of that stuff. So, what this does is, I'm not sure if anyone has seen snort inline before. It has some metadata in it that tells snort to drop things. So the first two, I'm going to jump over here. Where it says alert and drop is where it's got the metadata to tell the IPS to drop. What you could do is maybe change your user agent to something that alerts and drops and wonders why you don't get a connection. Turn it off and see if you do get a connection. Then you can work out for yourself what's going on. We've had some success with that. Also, this user agent thing, you can find it on my site as well. So, conclusions. And I'm trying to keep it short. Brace yourself because I do rant a little bit. The reality of this is that this is a fucking stupid rule. There is no other way of describing this rule than it took 2 minutes to author. But it's been there. This rule is in there longer than all the A's and all the C's. It's been there for ages. This is very easy to detect. We look for a null fragment in a server host field in a NetBIOS session. Bingo. Not hard to do, but yet we have a rule like this that sits here constantly. The reality of it is, it's the dangers of character matching, and that's the joke, by the way. That they're character matching beavers, we swap out for butthead, and boom, game over. And really, these rules, as I say, have been there for years and years and years, at least 12 years for the butthead one. And in wrapping up, if you really do want to annoy your IDS guys, do use all the A's, all the C's, and if you want to go past detection without getting caught, I suggest you use Z's or maybe Q's or something like that. But yeah, all the A's have got those bases covered. I've done a talk recently on false positive abuse. So what I can tell you is that if you're seeing false positives happen, that's not a mistake that's happening, there's something going on. Now either an event's being generated that's got your box freaking out, or someone's profiling you. I had a chat with someone who deals with 25,000 false positives a day in his organization. He loses between 3 to 4 man-hours a day dealing with this stuff. So stupid asked rules like this actually cost money. So make of that what you will. But there you go. All in all, that is the butthead evasion technique. And if you've got any questions, if you do have any questions, please feel free to come and grab me. I try to be approachable, unless you're source fire. I'm really sorry guys, it wasn't personal. But yeah, drop us an email, come and grab us, or throw us any questions. But thank you.
Thank you, Finux. I'm not sure if I'm going to find my overflow, because if I don't look for hex 41, I don't know what I'm looking for. Yeah, don't break this stuff, please. All right, so Travis had promised us to do a brief sermon here. I'm not sure what that means, if it's actually that we're going to pray together, and that would worry me.
So everybody please stand. All right, now be seated. I just always wanted to do that. So I was going to give a sermon on, everybody gives these talks on, this cool hack or why you should go to a conference that's interesting. But those are easy talks to give. So I was going to give a sermon on why you should become religious, go to the RSA conference, and associate with app developers. But instead, I think I'm going to make fun of Bitcoin folks. Just a show of hands. How many of you have seen a Bitcoin conversation which, and this is the part that limits it, did not end in one drunk saying to another drunk, "You don't understand economics, man." See, not a single hand went up, right? And so I'm going to preach to you a good sermon about Bitcoin so that you can learn how to do fun stuff with it. Now, everyone who talks about how Bitcoin works, with a couple of delightful exceptions, Kaminsky being one of them, they do this nonsense where they talk about the economics of it, inflation, and all of this nonsense without really knowing what they're talking about, but at the same time neglecting how it actually works. And the way that it actually works is that there is a ledger, and this ledger grows forward. And it goes forward by block collisions. So it's easy for you to add a little piece to it, but it's difficult for you to add a large piece to it. And the longest length is always the one that the different nodes accept. And so the result of this is that for you to roll back a transaction, roughly you need more than half of the computing power, because you have to have a longer chain than everyone else. And then at the very last minute, you have to let it fall back for them to see it. And there are a couple of tricks that buy you a few minutes, but by and large, there's not been a giant break of this. But forget about trying to cheat at it, and forget that they pretend that it's money. Consider for just a brief moment exactly what money is in this case. And in this case, it's the property of a key pair. So if I have one Bitcoin and I sign it over to you, then I sign over that amount in a ledger. And I sign it over to your public key, and then you can sign it over to someone else. And that's how it's supposed to work. But Kaminsky and I thought it would be kind of funny to do this neat little trick where you don't actually send it to a real public key. Because one of the things that's missing in public key cryptography is that if you just have your public-private key pair, there is no way for you to reliably distinguish between a random number and a public key. So this is Robert Heinlein book, Time Enough for Love, where the guy runs like the bank on a little colony that he's got, and at some point the locals come up and they nationalize the bank, and they demand that he hand over the bank and show them how it works. And he's like, oh, thank fucking God, I thought I'd have to pay back the money. And he explains that every time he gets a bill back, he burns it because that's an IOU that's no longer floating around. That's less money that he owes everybody. And because they nationalized his bank, he doesn't know anything. So if you're in this situation where you don't mind burning a little bit of money, you can make that 20-byte public key 20 bytes of ASCII text. And as a result of this, if you are running Bitcoin and your copy of the ledger is less than a year old, so like if you've caught up within the past year, then you can run strings-n20 /bitcoin/blk001.dat, and you pipe that into less, and you'll see a little bit of noise from early revisions of the Bitcoin client before they fixed out some bugs. And the very first line is the newspaper headline from when it began. And then there's a long range of nothing in which your terminal will appear to pause, and then you'll get a lovely message that Dan and I published as a eulogy to Len Sassman. And we put Len's picture in, we put a little blurb about him, and I hope that if you find this, you look up some of Len's papers and you read them, because a lot of them are very good papers. But just because he would find it funny, we followed this with ASCII art of Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve. So every /dot libertarian on earth who's running Bitcoin has a copy of Ben Bernanke's face on his hard disk because of me. Now, taking a look at the prior lecture, or prior sermon, that there are all of these little short strings. I mean, how many bytes of A's was that? Because if that's shorter than 20, you could actually inject that into the Bitcoin block file. And I thought it would be fun to encode as many false positives as you could, especially if antivirus software is looking at the files on the disk. I'm told that they used to ignore everything over maybe 35 megabytes, just because it was so large that there was a performance impact and they never found malware that large. But that Flame was so large that they revoked this rule. And if that's true, then you can send money in Bitcoin to the antivirus false positive strings, and this pushes them into the file as clear text. The ledger is never encrypted, even if the wallet file is. And this could be a lovely prank. Thank you kindly, and go in peace.